Today's daf is Eruvin Daf Mem Daled 44. We're going to start on Daf Mem Gimel 43 Amud Bet. About let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom, where it says Nehemiah Brei de Rav Hanilai. Nehemiah Brei de Rav Hanilai Mishachtei Shema'ata. So once it happened that Nehemiah, the son of Rav Hanilai, was so involved in his learning, he accidentally walked out of the Techum. So the Techum is the limit that you're allowed to walk. Now the problem is that once you walk out of the limit of the Techum, you're no longer allowed to walk more than 4 amot in any direction. So he can't walk back into the Techum. He's stuck. He realized that he's already out. So what's he going to do? Amar le Rav Chisda Rav Nachman. So Rav Chisda said to Rav Nachman, Nehemiah talmidecha sharoi b'tza'ar. He said, your student Nehemiah is in trouble. You need to do something about it. Amar lo, he said to him, Aseh lo mechitza shel bnei adam v'yikanes. What you should do is take some people, make an enclosure around him, and let him come back in. In other words, if we make, let's say, around him a line of people so that he is enclosed by people, so he's allowed then to move anywhere within that enclosure, because we say if you leave your Techum but you end up in an enclosed area, you can move around as much as you want inside the enclosed area. Okay, even though you're outside the Techum.
We've done this when my mother passed away. I know in Kohanim people came around, made a held hand.
Oh, to make a wall,
Walk around, and of course not over the Kohanim, but from the
right to make a wall. Yeah. So what they're saying is, now when you walk out of the Techum, normally you're stuck. You can only move a few feet in each direction. But if we make an enclosure, you're allowed to move into the entire enclosure. Let him walk in. So making an enclosure that goes around and opens back into the Techum, so he's able to walk back into the Techum that way. So Yativ Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Achorei de Rava. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was there, and he was behind Rava. Yativ Rava Kamei de Rav Nachman, and Rava was in front of Rav Nachman. Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So there's 2 Rav Nachmans here. Rav Nachman the teacher, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is the student. So they were having a conversation. Rava and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said to Rava, "Maika mi bayale." The Rav Chisda, what was the question that Rav Chisda was asking? In other words, why did he ask Rav Nachman what to do with the students? Maybe they had plenty of people to make the enclosure. That wasn't the issue. In other words, wherever this guy is standing, wherever the student is standing, do they have enough people to make an enclosure around him that will go around him and will open to the Techum or not? So if we're saying that they did, what's the issue at hand? Do we hold like Rabban Gamliel, or do we not hold like Rabban Gamliel? What does Rabban Gamliel say? Rabban Gamliel says that if a person leaves the Techum, normally they can't move once they're outside the Techum. They only have 4 amot around them. They only have 4 amot to move. However, this person left the Techum and entered an enclosure. That enclosure they can move around as much as they want, according to Rabban Gamliel. Even though they left their Techum, we look at the entire enclosure as one thing. So, do we hold like that or not? Is that the question? So therefore, we knew we could make a mechitza of people. The question was, will it work? Will it help? Or is he still restricted to 4 amot? He says, is that the question that they were asking? Do we allow him to move around in an enclosure or not? Or maybe or maybe the situation was different. There were not enough people. Let's say the person who walked out, Rabbi Nehemiah is standing over here. Okay? There are not enough people to enclose him and reach all the way back to the Techum, so that he could walk back into the Techum. Okay, there are only enough to get close to it, but not all the way there. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you're within 2 amot of the Techum, you can walk the 2 amot and go in. So they could make an enclosure that would be within 2 amot of the Techum. Is that enough? According to the other rabbis, no. You can't walk that extra 2 amot. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, you can. So that's not going to work here, right? That's only a structure, lavud, right? So So that was the question. Do we hold like that idea or not? So the answer is like this. So we must be talking about a case where they didn't have enough people to make an enclosure. Why would the question be raised whether we hold the other way? In other words, if we're interpreting this here as a question, what was the question? If the question was whether a person who leaves the Tichum and ends up in an enclosed area can walk around in the enclosed area, okay, or is the question whether if a person is within 2 amot of the Tichum, they can walk into it, back into it. So it says, it must be that the question at hand was, if you have 2 amot between you and the Tichum, can you walk back in? Why? Because Rabban Gamliel's position, Rav said, Halakha ka Rabban Gamliel badir v'sahar usfina. That we already said, that the halakha follows Rabban Gamliel, in all cases where a person left the Tichum and they ended up in an enclosed structure or in a boat or wherever it is, they're allowed to walk around the entirety of the enclosure. We don't say that, let's say you walk into a building, you're outside the Tichum, by accident, you walked out of the Tichum and you walked into a building. We don't say you have to stand at the front of the building. You can't go in because you're moving even further out of the Tichum. We don't say that. So that couldn't have been the question. If we enclose the guy by having people stand around him, we can't build an enclosure because it's Shabbat. If we enclose the guy by having people stand around him, then it should definitely be fine. So it must have been that there weren't enough people. Okay, so now obviously the people making the enclosure must have each made an Eruv Tichumin before Shabbat. Otherwise, how can they walk out of the Tichum to make an enclosure, right? So there weren't enough people who had made an Eruv Tichumin that we could ask them to do it. Okay, so the Gemara says, and the question is about Rabbi Eliezer. And Dikanami, we can bring a proof that this is what the question was. Because what did he tell them? He said, make an enclosure of people, v'yikanes, and then let him go into the Tichum. So, my yikanes, what does yikanes mean? Lav b'dila mechitza. What it means is that we can only make an enclosure up to so far. This is the guy. We make an enclosure around him, but the opening of the enclosure is going to be still with a space of 2 amot between the opening and the actual tichum. So we say, yikanes, let him walk in the rest of the way, no problem. Okay, so that must be what the issue was, whether we give him that extra 2 amot or not. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rava. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Rava are having this conversation. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak raises an objection. He says, "Wait a second. Nafal dofna lo yamid ba'adam behema v'chilim v'lo yizkof et hamita nefros alei asadin lefi she'en osin oel arai batachila biyom tov ve'en zarich lomar b'Shabbat." It says that if one of the walls of the sukkah fell down, you can't have a person stand there to make a wall. You can't put an animal to make a wall. You can't put vessels to make a wall. You can't stand up a bed to make a wall. And you can't spread, and in order to spread, let's say, sheets over it. In other words, because the beds were made of ropes, so they were open space, so you would put a sheet over it to complete the wall. You can't do that on Yom Tov, and you can't do it on Shabbat. So what does that show you? You can't make an enclosure using a person. So how can we have people line up around this guy to make an enclosure around him? It shouldn't be allowed. Amar le, he said, you're showing me one baraita that says that you can't have people make an enclosure. I'll tell you another baraita that says you can. Because it says, so because it says that a person can make his friend into a wall for his sukkah, so that he can v'shiyochal, so he can eat, v'yishteh, and he can drink, v'yishan, and he can sleep, and you can put up a bed and drape a sheet over it so that sun will not fall on a dead person. In other words, if there's a dead body, you don't want it to become putrid, as a result of the sun shining on it. So you would put up a sort of a shade. Okay, and you can also do that to prevent sun from ruining food. Okay, so what do you see here, though? It says a person can be made into a wall. In this braita. In the first braita, it said you can't use a person, you can't use an animal, and you can't use anything else to make a makeshift wall for the sukkah. In the second version, it says you can. So that's what we're following. We're saying that you can make an enclosure out of people around this individual, and that will be enough to allow him to re-enter the Tichum. Now, The Gemara says, wait a second. Kashen ahadadeh. That's very nice that you can bring a baraita that supports you, but there's a contradiction between the two, because the first baraita says you can't use a person to make a wall on Shabbat, and the second one says you can. La kashen, no problem. Ha Rabbi Eliezer, ha Rabbanan. One is Rabbi Eliezer, one is the rabbis. Titnan, as it says in the Mishnah, pekaka chalon. If you remember, we learned this in Masekhet Shabbat. If there's a window that has a certain piece that goes back into it, in other words, a shutter for the window, basically. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer says, if it's tied to the window and it hangs from the window, it's not resting on the ground, it's hanging, then you can put it back in. But the rabbis say it doesn't matter. Even if it's detached, you can do it. So too here. What are the rabbis saying? A temporary fix, like putting this shutter into the window, it's no problem because you know you're going to take it out again. It's not considered building. So too, you know your friend's not going to stand there forever. It's temporary. He's making a wall. Temporary. So Rabbi Eliezer would say a temporary wall is still building. It's no good. But the Chachamim say a temporary wall is fine. So that's the issue here. Same issue. Just like one allows you to put the shutter into the window because it's only temporary, and one disallows it, so too, one will allow you to have a person stand there to make a wall, and one will disallow it. The Gemara says, though, Itmar Allah, but it was stated about this. Amar Rabba Bar Chanan, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Chanan said that Rabbi Yochanan said, "Akol modim she'en osin oel aray b'tchila b'yom tov, ve'en tzarich lomar b'Shabbat." Everybody agrees that you can't make a temporary structure on Yom Tov, and certainly not on Shabbat. Lo nechlik wala lohosif. The only issue was, can you add to a structure on Shabbat? Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Eliezer says you can't add to a structure on Yom Tov, and certainly not on Shabbat. And the rabbis say that you can do it on Shabbat and certainly on Yom Tov. So why is it adding? Because you have a wall and it has a window, and you're just putting a shutter in to the window, but you're not putting up an entire wall. But in our case, what are you doing? You're missing an entire wall. And what are you doing to fix it? You're putting a person to stand there to fill the gap. So you're actually putting in a whole new wall. It might be temporary, but it's still a full wall. Nobody allows you to put a full wall up on Shabbat or Yom Tov. Only that they would allow you to add to it, but not to put up a fully new entity. So forget about that. That's not relevant to our situation. So what's going to explain the two baraitot? One baraita saying that a person can make a wall, be a wall on Shabbat, and one saying they can't. One is Rabbi Meir and one is Rabbi Yehuda. Titania, as we said in the baraita, asala behema dofen l'sukkah. Rabbi Meir posel, v'Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Meir says that if a person wants to use an animal to be the wall of the sukkah, so he brings a big cow and he makes the cow a wall of the sukkah, that's no good. Rabbi Yehuda says it is good. Rabbi Meir says it's not good because the animal will just walk away. He's not stable. Right? Rabbi Eliezer says, listen, as long as he's standing. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda says as long as he's sitting there, he's fine. So how does that apply to our situation? Rabbi Meir de kapasel hatam. Rabbi Meir invalidates the animal as a wall of the sukkah. Alma lam mechitzahi. What does that mean? It's not a mechitzah. It's not a wall. And hacha shareh. So therefore, over here, when you're making a person into a wall, what is he going to say? It's fine because you're not doing anything. It's nothing. Delav midei kaved. He's not doing anything. Rabbi Yehuda de kamachshir hatam. But Rabbi Yehuda, who says an animal is a valid wall, so de kamachshir hatam alma mechitzahi hacha asar. Since he counts it as a valid mechitzah, here he's going to say you can't do it. So you can't have a person serve as a wall. It makes sense, right? If you hold that it is a wall, then you shouldn't be allowed to do it. If you hold that it isn't a wall, then you would be allowed to do it. Now, Rashi points out that there are many holes in this step of the Gemara. For example, it's clear that the person who says that a person is going to stand there and make your wall is saying that it counts as a wall because it says then you can sleep in the sukkah and you can eat in the sukkah. So how can you say the reason why Rabbi Meir says that the person's allowed to stand there and be the wall of your sukkah, he can serve as the wall of your sukkah, is because it doesn't really count? Of course it really counts. Okay, but the Gemara is going to reject this anyway. The other problem is, if we're holding like Rabbi Meir and saying that a person is not a wall, so then what does it serve us to make the enclosure of people? It's nothing.
Question.
Yeah.
The people have mind. If you force the person, with animal, you do it whether the animal wants to. Right,
but the person is, you can say to the person, sit here. And they'll say, okay, sit here for 20 minutes. Okay. An animal, you say, sit here for 20 minutes. As soon as he wants to leave, he doesn't understand you, then walks away.
If the person doesn't want to do it, you hold him there?
No, you can't force him, but the point is that you can rely on him. He's reliable. He's not going to walk away by himself. The animal will just walk away. Right? The person, he sits there. Now, okay. So wait a second. But his brother, this doesn't really make any sense. Because number one, the Braita that prohibited, okay? The Braita that said, that spoke about animals and kelim, okay, and a bed and all that, didn't talk about, in this Braita where Rabbi Meir is saying that an animal is not a valid mechitza, right? He didn't mention anything about any of the other cases that we're talking about. Okay, because he only mentioned the case of behema. He didn't say the case of a person. And we're talking about who is it that allows you to make a wall out of a person on Shabbat. Did Rabbi Meir ever talk about a person? He was only talking about an animal, first of all. Vitu, and furthermore, Rabbi Meir aliba deman. Who is Rabbi Meir going like? Now, obviously, Rabbi Meir cannot hold like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says you can't even add to a structure. Certainly, you can't do this, make a person become a wall. Okay? But even according to the rabbis, they say you can put the shutter into the window because you're adding, and you're only adding temporarily. So there's two positive things. You're adding to a structure, you're not creating a structure, and it's only temporary. But here, you're making a wall. There's no wall there, and you're putting the person to fill the gap. So how could it be? So Ella, rather, forget this. Hava harabanan, they're both following the rabbis. The chilim akelim lakasha. So now we have to resolve the contradiction. How could it be that one Braita tells you that you're allowed to make, that you're not allowed to make a wall out of adam behema v'kelim? You're not allowed to make a wall out of a person or an animal or vessels. Okay? And the second one said that you could make a wall out of a person, and you can even set up a bed to make it into a wall also, in order to cast shade, right? So how do we resolve this contradiction? It's no problem. Because remember, there's a sukkah requires only 3 walls. Right? 2.5 walls really, but 3 walls. We're talking about where the 4th wall broke. So why do you want to replace it? Because it's windy, it's not as comfortable with only 3 walls. But really it's kasher. The sukkah is a sukkah kshera. You don't need the 4th wall. You want the 4th wall. You don't need it. Right? So that's what we're talking about here. So when you have a 4th wall is the concern. So then you can put a person to stand there. You can put kelim. Why? Because it's not necessary. But when it's necessary and it's really going to make the sukkah a sukkah kshera, then you're not allowed to do it. That's the distinction. But everyone agrees that a person who's making a mechitza, it would be considered construction. In other words, if he's really making the wall, it would be a problem. Dikanami, and this is similarly supported by what it says, because it says nafal dofna shemamina, because it says in the Braita, if its wall fell. What is its wall? The wall that it needs to make it kasher. If the wall that the sukkah needs to make it valid fell, then you can't repair it by having a person stand there, by putting vessels there, by putting an animal there, because you are fixing the sukkah. If it's the 4th wall, it's no problem, because the 4th wall you don't need it anyway. Now we turn to Amud Bet Ela Adam Adam Kasher, but we still have a problem about people. Okay, when it comes to a human being, now Rashi explains, what do we mean people? Because in the case of the Ela Adam, it says putting a man to stand there, Kedesh yochal v'yishteh v'yishan. That why are you having the person stand there? Your explanation is very nice, but the only problem is, it says you can have a person stand there so that you can eat and drink and sleep in the sukkah. That means that you couldn't do it otherwise. That means that it wasn't kasherah. It was invalid, and you're making it valid. So what's the implication? That having the person stand there actually does render it a sukkah kasherah. Correct? So what are we going to say? So Adam nami lakashya. You're right. Both cases must be talking about a situation where it's the 3rd wall, not the 4th wall. In other words, we have to be talking about a case where you were making the sukkah functional. However, kan leda'at, kan shelo mida'at. One is intentional, one is unintentional. In other words, if you just tell the person, please stand here, don't move, stand right here. He doesn't know why he's standing right there. He's really making the wall of your sukkah. Since it's only temporary, and even though he's making the sukkah functional, it's okay. But if it's lada'at, he knows what he's doing. So in that case, Rashi says that he knows he's standing there for mechitzot, it's no good. But Rashi says if he didn't know, mutar mishum asiyat oel leka lebemar de'en derech binyan bekach. Okay, aval kili derech binyan bekach hu hilkach doven shlishit asur. So Rashi explains, when it comes to a person, if we're dealing with the third wall of the sukkah, even though it's the third wall, even though the person standing there makes it the third wall, since he doesn't know why he's doing it, it's okay because it's only temporary, right? It's only temporary, right? It's not permanent, and so therefore it's not similar to a case of binyan, of building, because you don't use people as building material, number one, and number two, he doesn't even know what he's doing. But kelim, if you were to put a bed or something else there, some other vessel there, it's normal to use inanimate objects to build. And so therefore, even if only on a temporary basis, like putting a bed frame up to complete the sukkah, if it's the third wall, it's no good. Because the third wall is actually completing the sukkah. The fourth wall we don't care because the fourth wall is dispensable anyway. So you want to temporarily block the wind from coming on the fourth wall? That's fine.
Only person cannot know about the standing over there. I think that's only it's non-Jew.
Right. You say to him, "Hey, stand right here." Why? Don't worry. Just stand right here. Okay.
A Jewish person, he must know.
Well, you would think so, but whatever.
What about
you told him
non-Jew?
Right, a non-Jew would count it. It doesn't matter. He's just standing there to make a wall. So, okay. So, Veha de Rabbi Nechemia bre de Rabbi Hanilai lada'at tava. So the issue is, what about the fact that how did we get on this whole discussion? Because Rav Chizda said, make a human partition around this guy. This guy walked out of the Tichum. So the issue is, you walk out of the Tichum, now you can only walk 4 amot. He can't walk back into the Tichum. But the halacha is that if you walk out of your Tichum, you walked 2,010 amot out. Instead of up to the 2,000 mark, you walked out. But you walked into an enclosed area. And enclosed area is okay, you can walk around the whole thing now. So let's say you walk to here, but it happens to be that this is the opening of an enclosed, fenced-in area. Now, you don't have to stand by the fence. You can walk into it as much as you want. Even though let's say this was 2,010 amot. When you entered the fence, it was 2,010 amot. And the other side of the fence is another 1,000 amot. You can walk all the way. It doesn't matter because it's all one enclosure. Okay? So what Rav Chizda said was make an enclosure around this person that reaches back to their original tichum. So now they'll be able to walk back. But the problem is, you just told me that if you make a mechitza of people, you're not allowed to do that. And here, what are the people doing it? It's on purpose, right? It's on purpose. And they're making a partition on purpose. So it says, Shalom midatava. They didn't know what they were doing. Rav Chizda told them, just make a circle here. They didn't know what they were doing.
Rabbi, the principle that it had to be done before onset of Shabbat, that doesn't hold here.
What?
The previous daf, they were discussing if it's done.
If a wall, even if it comes into existence on Shabbat, is good.
Not before Shabbat.
A wall doesn't have to be there before Shabbat. A wall could come on Shabbat and fall down and be created on Shabbat, and it's good. Mechitzot, the actual physical walls, even if like non-Jews build a physical wall on Shabbat, it's good. It's an enclosure. It's only halachic things like setting up the tichum, that has to be done before Shabbat. But a structure doesn't matter. So you're making a structure. But what about the fact that they knew what they were doing? They didn't know what they were doing. But it says, Rav Chizda himself, miha, lada'atava. Rav Chizda knew what he was doing, so how could he do it? So Rav Chizda shelo min minyan hava. What that means is he didn't count in the minyan. What it means is he told other people, go stand in a circle right here. Okay, we don't know. The rabbi said to stand in a circle. We don't know why. So they went and did it. He didn't participate because he knew why. They didn't know what they were doing, so they're not culpable for building a wall on Shabbat. He would have been culpable because he knew what he was doing, but he didn't participate. So he's okay. Now, I wanted to just see if there's an illustration, but there isn't. Now, that's the conclusion of that sugya. So that was the trick that they used to bring Nechemia bar Rav Hanilai back into the Tichum. Now, Hanhu b'nei ganana da'ilo maya b'machitza shel b'nei adam. There were certain individuals Ganana would seem to mean that they were vegetable growers, I assume, that brought water into their enclosure by using, in other words, there was water left out in the Reshut HaRabim. There's no way to get from the public domain the water into the private domain. So what did they do? They made a mechitza of Bnei Adam. They made a line of people that made an enclosure. They held, arm in arm around, and then they were able to carry the water into the private domain because they made a new private domain out of people. Right? So they were able to do that. No problem. However, Nagidinu Shmuel whipped them. He punished them. Why? Just because they said you can make a mechitza of people when the people don't know about it, that doesn't mean when they know about it. And here they all conspired and did it together. That's not acceptable. Okay, so now there were certain jugs of water, or whatever they were, pouches of water, okay, in the public street of Mechuzah. They belonged to Rava. Bahade Rava mipirkei al inhu niale. Okay, what happened was that everybody surrounded Rava when he came back from giving the shiur. He would go out and give a shiur, and when the rabbi walks out, right, what happens? Everybody circles around him, right? Everybody's walking around him. They made a partition of people. So what happened? His shabash, his helper, said, I can carry the water because I'm walking with everybody and I'm in a private domain. There's a circle of people. You've seen like the Rebbe walking, everyone's around him, right? So he walked home with it. Nice, okay. Now, were the people surrounding the Rebbe planning to make a mechitza? No, they just wanted to walk around with him. So it's fine. However, what happened was, L'shabbata achriti ba'ei ailinu. The next Shabbat, when it happened, on another Shabbat, he wanted to do it again. Ve'asarlo, he prohibited him. Dahavale kila da'at vasur. Because after you did it one time, now people know in the back of their heads, we're helping the Rebbe bring his water. So you can't do it now. The first time, when it was a surprise, said it, right? Second time already, we know it's a trick. It's no good. So what does that show you? That shows you something interesting. Lada'at doesn't just mean that you consciously said, let's do a trick. It means even if you know that that's why you're doing it, it's also lada'at. Okay. You know it's going to be used for that. So, ve'asur, so that's prohibited. Levi ilule tivna. They brought Levi on Shabbat straw by using human partitions. Ze'iri aspasta. Okay? Aspasta was brought to Ze'iri in that way. Aspasta is fodder for the animals. Rav Shimi bar Chaya Maya, and Rav Shimi bar Chaya was brought water using this kind of unusual trick. In other words, when they were all walking home together, that they had this human partition, they were able to transfer the water or these items along with them. Now, but it can't be done when the participants know what they're doing and it's deliberate. Okay, so that's what the halacha is. Now, Mishnah says, Birashut, somebody who went out birshut, meaning he left the techum with permission. Rashi gives some examples. For instance, in the old days, when they used to determine Rosh Chodesh based upon seeing the moon, let's say Friday night you saw the moon. What do you have to do? You have to go report to Bet Din. If no witnesses come, how are we going to do Kiddush HaChodesh? Even though it's Shabbat, you're allowed to go. Even though it's outside the techum, you have to go. So this person went out heading to the Bet Din in Yerushalayim to testify that he saw the moon. Or there was a situation of military action going on and you wanted to come and participate. Or there was some emergency or whatever. Or it says you're a midwife coming to help somebody give birth. In any case, you had permission to leave the Techum. But what happened was, and they said to him, the problem is, he left the Techum already and he finds out that he's not needed anymore. So he left the Techum birshut, he was allowed to, but now he's stuck. What does he do? Now normally when you leave your Techum, what happens? You have only 4 amot to go. You can go and you're stuck basically, you can't move. You have a little area, 4 amot, that's it. But in this case, since you left the birshut, halachically you had permission to leave the tchum, we give you from wherever you hear that you're fired from the job, that you're not needed anymore, we give you 2,000 damot as if that's your makom shavita, as if that were the place you started Shabbat. Since it's rabbinic, they can be lenient. So they said, you know what? Wherever you find out that you're not needed anymore, now you have the 2,000 damot. So, if he's still in his techum, Okay, we're going to see the Gemara interprets this. Ki'ilu lo yatsa. It's like he didn't leave. Now that's a silly statement. It would seem like a strange statement, because what does it mean? If you're in your techum, it's like you didn't leave. If you're in your techum, you didn't leave. What does it mean? It's like you didn't leave. So we'll see what that means in a minute. Anybody who goes out to save a life can return to his place. Okay, the Gemara is going to explain what this means. Now, the Gemara says, so the very thing that we pointed out in the Mishnah, everything made sense up to that statement, right? If you didn't leave the Techum yet, it's like you didn't leave yet. What does that mean? If you didn't leave yet, you didn't leave yet. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba says, this is what it means. If he's still in his Techum, in other words, he leaves his house, and he's still 1,000 amot from his house, or 1,000 amot from his city, and somebody says, oh, they don't need you for Kiddush HaChodesh. They already have somebody there. Okay, so what can he do now? So he says, since he didn't leave his Techum yet, it's like nothing happened. So why do I need to know that? Pshita, this is obvious. Because this person planned on leaving his Techum. He planned on it. Right? So we could say, the minute he leaves home, he no longer has this Techum anymore. It's davar chadash. It's something new. Right? Because he's saying, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and testify in Jerusalem about Kiddush HaChodesh. So the minute he decides to do that, he's only 1,000 amot from home and he's told, we don't need you anymore. You might have thought, once he left his city, he canceled his Techum. So we have to now judge him from where he is now, even though he hasn't actually left the original Techum yet. So that's why Rabbah says it comes to teach you. As long as he hasn't left the original Techum yet, the fact that he intended to do so doesn't mean anything. Once he actually leaves it and then finds out they don't need him, now he gets the 2,000 amot to every direction from wherever he's stuck. Okay? Now, Rav Shimi Bar Chaya Amar, Rabbi Shimi Bar Chaya says, Hachi Amar, I disagree with you, Rabbi. That's not what it means. What it means is like this: Imayu techumin shenatnu lo chachamim muvla'in betoch hatechum shelo, but then ki'ilu lo yatsa mitechumo. What it means is like this. We're not talking like Rabbah says about a person who never left their actual Techum. He left, according to Rabbah, we're talking about a case where the person left the city and he went only 1,000 amot and then found out that he's not needed anymore. Since he's still in his original Techum, no problem. Rav Shimi says no. It's talking about even if he actually left his Techum. He walked 2,000 amot, he walked 3,000 amot out. Okay, 3,000 amot away from his city. So what do we say now? So according to the Mishnah, it sounds like, and at 3,000 amot, they tell him, oh, we don't need you. So what do you mean you don't need me? Now I'm stuck. I left my Techum already. I'm 1,000 amot past my Techum. I'm 3,000 amot back from the city. And they say, well, now you have 2,000 amot in every direction. So Rav Shimi says, you know what? Let's say this guy had left to the west. Okay? So you went 2,000 amot to the west. You were allowed to do that. Now you went an extra 1,000. You weren't allowed to do that, but you had permission because it was a mitzvah, right? Now what are the rabbis telling you? You have 2,000 amot in every direction. That also means back east, right? Now if I walk back east, 2,000 amot, where am I now? Only 1,000 amot from my original city, right? So I'm within my original Techum, right? So Rav Shimi is saying that's what the Mishnah means. If you left you went 3,000 or even 3,999 amot to the west, and then you found out you're not needed anymore. So we give you 2,000 amot in every direction, including back east. You could walk back east 2,000 amot now, and where are you going to be? Within your original Techum, because that last amah is within your original Techum. And since it's within your original Techum, you can keep going all the way back home, according to Rav Shimi. We don't take away your original Techum because muvla'in is what it means. It overlaps. Your new Techum overlaps with your old Techum. If you went 4,000 full amot to the west and then found out, oh shoot, I'm stuck here, they don't need me anymore, so I can't keep going, and you walk 2,000 amot, you're still outside your original Techum, no good. But if you were in your original Techum, if there's overlap, then it's good. Now, the Gemara says, what is the machloket between Rabbah and Rav Shimi? According to Rabbah, once you step out of your original Techum, forget it. You can never go back in. Okay? Now, what is the machloket here? The machloket is Mar Savar Havla'at Techomin Miltahi. Umar Savar Lav Miltahi. One opinion says that overlapping Techomin are valid, meaning if you were given a new Techum rabbinically, now you have actually double Techum. If they overlap, you have double. We extend you. So in this case, you went 3,999 amot out. So we give you not only the 2,000 amot now to the east, but also the original 2,000 amot you had that way, and also the 2,000 amot on the other side. In other words, you have we add on because there's overlap. As long as there's overlap, we extend the tichum. That's what Rav Shimi is saying. Umar Savar Lav Miltahi, and Rabbah says no. Overlapping doesn't matter. You can only have one tichum at a time. So since you went 3,000 amot to the west, and now you have 2,000 amot, you could walk back, and now you're within your original tichum, but it's not your tichum anymore. It doesn't matter. It's not your tichum anymore. We gave you a new one. It doesn't matter that it overlaps with the old one. It's totally new.
They can't extend it?
It's not an extension according to Rabbah. It's a new thing. We don't care about that was the original tichum. So, Amar le Abaye le Rabbah, Abaye said to Rabbah, Ve'at lo tisbera dehavla'at techomin miltahi. Do you really not believe that overlapping techomin are valid, that we extend techom when there's overlap? But wait a second. Uma ilu shavat ba'me'ara. If a person did Shabbat in a cave, and this cave is shebetocha arba'at alafim, inside there's 4,000 amot, this of width. In other words, the cave is 4,000 amot wide, and ve'al gaga pachot me'arba'at alafim ama lo nimtza me'alechet kula v'chutza la alpayim ama. So what we're talking about is a situation like this. It's hard to visualize. Let's see if there's a picture that helps us here. No, for some reason they don't really seem to give a picture of this one. Even though it would seem like, well, Rashi gives the picture there. That's the only picture we have. Fine. Okay, so the picture in the Rashi there is that it's shaped, basically the idea here is that there's a cave, and it has an opening on either side, okay, at the top. So when you come out, in other words, it narrows as it goes towards ground level. So when you get to ground level, there's less than 4,000 amot between the entrance to the left and the entrance to the right. So what happens? If you step out of the cave on the right, you can go to the 2,000 amot to your right and 2,000 amot to your left. Will that 2,000 amot to your left reach you to the other doorway? No, because the other doorway is, let's say, 3,000 amot away or something like that. Right? So it's not close enough. But if you were to come out of the left side opening, you would have 2,000 amot to your left and 2,000 amot to your right. Will that reach you to the other doorway? No. But because let's say there's 3,000 amot in between them, just for argument's sake. So, but there's overlap, right? The 1,000 amot in the middle is overlap. Correct? Mathematically speaking, let's just assume there are 3,000. So the 2,000 on one side, 2,000 on the other side, the middle 1,000 are overlapping. So what is Abaye saying? Isn't that overlapping techomin? Overlapping techomin. Now, if the doorways were 5,000 amot apart, okay, or 4,000 even, they're 4,000 apart, a full 4,000, then there's no overlap. Then we agree that if you came out of the left side, you have 2,000 amot to the left and 2,000 to the right, and you can't get to that other doorway. And if you came out of the right side doorway, then you'd have to the right 2,000 and to the left 2,000, and you can't reach the other doorway. You would have to go back in the cave to get to the other doorway. Only. Okay? But here you have two different points your tichum can be calculated from. They overlap though, right? They're overlapping. So you see it's valid, the overlapping. Because they overlap, because if you went out the left side, you would have 2,000 amot in that direction. If you went out the right side, you have 2,000 amot in that direction. Plus you have the 3,000 amot in the middle. So you have a total actually of, I'm just saying 3,000 for argument's sake, it could be even more. But you have a total of 7,000 amot basically. Because of that overlap between the two tichumin. So what's the problem? So you see overlapping works. We don't say that, if you came out of the left side, now you can only go 2,000 amot to your right, and you can't reach the other opening. Because since the techumin overlap, and when you go the 2,000 amot to the right, you're now in the space also of the techum from the right side to the left, right? You're in the other techum, so you can keep going. It's no problem. You have 2. So he said to him, so Rabbah answers him, Velo shanelach. So Amar le, he said to him, Velo shanelach ben echad shavat ba'avir mechitzot mi ba'od yom le'echad lo shavat ba'avir mechitzot mi ba'od yom. There's a difference between a person who stayed in mechitzot. He stayed in an enclosed area from Friday. So because he stayed in an enclosed area and it was a unique enclosed area, he has 2 techumin simultaneously that apply to him because of that. Because of the nature of the cave. But if you're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a field, you can only have 1 techum at a time. And so this person who left the techum and he's 3,000 amot out of the techum, we don't say that there's an overlap between the 2. Because that second techum that he got is a new thing that came on Shabbat. It's not part of an enclosure that he was there from before Shabbat. He walked out on Shabbat outside of the enclosure, and now he has a new 2,000 amah techum because he lost the original one, and so he can't walk back. And when you didn't stay in an enclosed area, it's not true. In other words, is it really not true that overlap works? We learned in the Mishnah, as we turn to Memhei Amud Aleph, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Shetayim Yikanes Gimelo Yikanes. Rabbi Eliezer had said, as we learned before, that if you walk out of the Techum, but you're still within 2 amot of the Techum, you can walk back in. Why can you walk back in? Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, when you walk out of the Techum, you automatically have 2 amot to the front, 2 amot to the left, 2 amot to the right, 2 amot behind. Only 2 in each direction. You're the center of your new Techum. Okay? So let's say you walked out only 2 amot. So in front of you is 2 amot away is the border of the Techum. 3 would be too much, because you only have 2 in front, 2 to the left, 2 to the right, 2 behind. According to Rabbi Eliezer. So what happens? My love, Rabbi Eliezer l'tamei da'amar v'hu be'emtza'an v'arba amot di'avulei rabanan keman demivna andamu v'ka'amar yikanes alma havla'at techumin miltahi. So what do you see? That the 4 amot that he has are like overlapped, in other words, since he's 2 amot out of the border of the techum. So as Rashi explains, lefichach zeh sheyatza bet amot chutz techum kevan de bet amot devukot lo betchumo. Since the 2 amot in front of you come right up against your techum, you're allowed to walk right in. It's like overlapping, right? It's like overlapping because they're adjacent. Amar le Rabbah said to him. I'm sorry, wait. Amar le Rabbah bar Chana la Abaye. Rabbah bar Chana said to Abaye, how can you bring from Rabbi Eliezer a refutation of Rabbah? Rabbi Eliezer is a yachid, is an individual opinion. That's not what the Chachamim say. So why are you bringing Rabbi Eliezer? So he said, Amar le said to him, yes, the shmiyali minei, because I learned minei demar from the master. Adkan lo plegei Rabbanan alei Rabbi Eliezer ele dvar harashut aval dvar mitzvah modulei. That according to the rabbis, in other words, the rabbis only argue with Rabbi Eliezer with regard to a davar reshut, when a person walks out of the techum for no reason or for not a mitzvah. But when it's a mitzvah, even they agree. If it's two amot out, he can walk back in. So what do you see? Abaye says, you see from this that adjacent or overlapping techumin are valid. So when you have your new techum is immediately adjacent, your 2 amot, let's say, go right up to your techum, that's fine. Okay, that's considered an overlapping, and you're allowed to walk back into your old techum. So too here, if a person walked 3,000 amot out and then finds out he's not needed anymore, since his new techum overlaps with his old techum, he's allowed to walk all the way back to his house on Shabbat, like Rav Shimi bar Chia said before, and not like Rabbah said that there's no overlapping of techumin.